Welcome to Meldon Law and Friends, your weekly podcast from Meldon Law, a statewide law firm with its primary office in Gainesville and also covering the entire South Florida area, the Tri-County area from Miami-Dade through Broward, through Palm Beach County, and also, of course, in Marion County and Ocala. Jeffrey Meldon, it's New Year's Day 2021. How many people, not just nationwide, worldwide, are so happy to say that date?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. We're excited. We're moving into a new year, and there's hope on the way.
I agree. And still, as we've been talking, we finished strong at Meldon Law in 2020.
2020 was the most unusual year I've had in my 49 years of practicing law. It was absolutely unpredictable. We started out with visions of a normal year. It soon morphed into what we thought was going to be a disaster. And somehow we stuck together. We pulled our team closer in many ways. We figured out how to go paperless at the same time as, becoming the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. And we did it all during madness.
We did it, and I attribute it to your leadership. And like you said, we pulled the troops together back in mid-March, early April, and said, look, we can go one of two ways. We can cave or we can just rally and move forward. And really, the last month and a half of 2020 was pretty incredible.
Yes. A lot of it I attribute to the mastermind group I'm in with 25 other major law firms around the United States, because we were meeting every week and discussing what was going on, and they gave me the courage to expand rather than contract.
And with that thought in mind about how we started incorporating new technology, of course, Zoom was totally foreign to us. Today, on our show, we're doing something different. This is our 10th episode of Meldon Law and Friends, which is by in itself pretty incredible. But we're doing a virtual guest, an amazing man, a guy by the name of Nathan Whitaker. I mean, we could talk for the entire next 30 minutes about his accomplishments: an author, lawyer, football player, public speaker, entrepreneur, sports agent, many things. But Nathan, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jeffrey. It's good to be on. And gosh, I kind of like the idea of you just talking about me for 30 minutes. That's from my aspect. It's great to be on, and yeah, it's good to have the page turned on 2020. A lot of good things that came out of 2020, but a lot of time, yeah, it's nice to be moving forward.
No question about that. So, I saw so many amazing things from your resume. You played football for the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier. Let's start a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, just a disclaimer from the beginning: I look so much more impressive on paper than I really am. But I do appreciate that. Yeah, so I got to play for Coach Spurrier. I actually was recruited to play baseball at Duke, and then the coaching staff there invited me to walk on as kind of a preferred walk-on. The wrinkle came in that the staff that was inviting me to walk on all left, and they hired Coach Spurrier. So I was thrilled as a kid who'd grown up in Gainesville, but I was also a little concerned because I didn't have any relationship with him or the new coaches. And it ended up being just such a great blessing to play for him for the 3 years he was there. And, we really coached him up, taught him everything he needed to know, and then he put it
You coached him up. I believe you.
And then in Gainesville, he just put it into practice.
What position did you play?
I was a kicker and punter. So I was, my grandmother thought it was great that I played the position where if the other guys hit me, it was a penalty.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to Eastside here in Gainesville.
Now, your family is fifth generation Florida. Tell us a little bit about the history of your family.
Yeah, so my mom grew up in the St. Pete area, actually in Seminole, Florida, right by Clearwater. Sure. And her dad, my granddad, developed the Seminole Mall and had nurseries and the like. But it was very much old Florida. She talks about, growing up and having a pet alligator and peacocks on their property, and all of which, of course, is developed and paved now. But I grew up hearing those stories, and we've been around a long time. So after going off to college and law school, it was nice to get back down to my roots and be in Florida. And again, not only fifth generation Floridian, but a fourth generation. I guess I'm actually third generation. My daughter's a fourth generation Gator. And so it was good to, my wife accused me, I got a master's a few years ago, and it was a 1-year program through the business school at UF. And I was telling her, it was, even though I had a law degree and even though I had my undergrad degree, I said, this is a short little business program. It'll really be helpful for me. And she rolled her eyes and said, you picked the shortest thing that finally made you a Gator.
So how did your family wind up in Gainesville?
My dad came here to go to law school in 73, and then they never left. And so he practiced law for a number of years here in town, and now is doing ministry stuff. And he actually coached baseball at UF. I went off to Duke to play baseball and football, and he ended up coaching at the same time. He had been first at Eastside with me, and then at Santa Fe College, and then went over to Florida. And so it was funny. It was my dream had been to go to Omaha and to the College World Series, and the dream came true. But I was in the stands watching my dad on the field. So I thought, this isn't exactly how I'd envisioned it, but it was still pretty cool.
So you say your dad started law school in 1973. Gee, that might have been about the time a certain Mr. Meldon started his law practice. I'm surprised they might have run into each other at some point in time.
I'm sure they did.
So now after you went to Duke, you went to Harvard Law School, which in and of itself is very prestigious, and did very well there. And then you kind of went into a traditional, you were a law clerk for Judge Terrell Hodges?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He was one of my favorite judges. What was it like clerking for him?
Fantastic. Just a great experience. And I didn't, having watched my dad practice law, I wasn't sure that's what I wanted to do. Respected it very much, but wasn't entirely certain. But I was an English major and finished college and couldn't figure out what you do with an English major. And so I was going to take all the tests, the LSAT, the GMAT, the GRE, and then sort through grad school. And the LSAT was first, and it went really, really well. And so found myself at Harvard and thought, again, I'm just getting more training. Who knows what I'll do with it? And then my dad had clerked for Judge Hodges in the 70s, coming out of law school. And then, and so I knew Judge Hodges growing up and the like. So I was fortunate enough for him to hire me. And getting to your question, so thoughtful, so reasoned with everything he did. Never heard him use his gavel. One time he slammed his hand down on the on the bench because he got upset with an attorney who, he told him several times, do not say, and the attorney started down that path. But he always said, if you use power, you lose some of it. And so he felt like, and he would let us know in chambers every now and then, Mr. Whitaker, if you don't get this order to my desk, I'll have the U.S. Marshals come to you at your home. And so the order from that, you knew he had the power.
What I remember about Judge Hodges, though, in addition to the fact he was an outstanding judge, huge Gator fan, and I'll just give the short version of the story. I once had a civil hearing from him, and it was a pretty hotly contested back and forth. All of a sudden, his judicial assistant came in, whispered something in his ear, and he very quietly said, "We will now take an adjournment." We learned later that head coach Ron Zook had paid a visit to him, and he wanted to talk and greet Coach Zook. It was right when he first became named head coach. And after a little bit, he came back and resumed the hearing. Hey, I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing.
I'm not surprised. You'll see him often still at a ton of games, Gator games. And he, in fact, shortly after I was hired, Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote a note to him saying, Terry, it's my understanding that you hired a new law clerk without conducting any open interviews. And so if you don't mind, just for, documentary purposes, please give us some explanation of what happened. And he said, well, I watched the note, and I still have it. In fact, I was looking at it the other day on my desk, but he wrote back to the Chief Justice. He said, I watched Mr. Whitaker grow up. His father clerked for me in the 70s. So I watched Mr. Whitaker grow up. I saw him attend Duke and Harvard Law School. He graduated cum laude from both. Obviously, someone needed to complete his education. And given that I have 2 degrees from the University of Florida, I was that person. And so he's just a Gator through and through. So when I got my master's, I called him and said, Judge, I've finally added to my education with something that counts. And he thought that.
So you went to work for the Jaguars then after that?
I did. Well, I practiced law for 2 years after clerking. A huge firm in Greensboro, North Carolina, 250 attorneys across the state. Great firm, great people. And civil litigation was not for me. And so I was there 2 years and then landed a job with the Jaguars. So
How did you wind up getting that job with the Jags?
So in addition to coaching baseball, my dad had represented a couple of players coming out of UF along the way. And so through his connections, had gotten to meet some people around the league. And so one of those folks was then with the Jaguars. And so I was hired by the Jaguars. My first year, they kind of thought they knew what they were going to do with me down the line, but just coming in, they needed somebody to handle travel. So my first year, I'm coming in out of practicing law and a law school background, and I'm learning how to use Excel so that I can make an airline seating chart. And I'm putting this coach here next to this coach. And then somebody later tells me, those two coaches aren't really getting along so great. And so I'm thinking there's no way that any of my education trained me for this. So spent 3 years at the Jaguars doing first travel and then what they had in mind, the salary cap work and contract negotiations with coaches and players. And so I was there 3 years all told, and it was a good run.
That was the Weaver family back when they owned it, right?
Correct. The Weavers owned it. Coach Coughlin was the head coach, and we went 14-2 my second year there, and really had some great teams, great players.
Now, that must have been a lot more fun than sitting in a corporate law office.
You know, there were a couple of times, one time in Tampa in particular, not to jump ahead with my story, but one day Coach Gruden had come on with the Bucks, and I'm all stressed out. In particular, we were losing, or I don't remember what, but I'm walking into the office across the parking lot, and I'm thinking, man, this stinks. I can't believe what did I think? What was I thinking taking this job? And I looked down, I'm wearing shorts, tennis shoes, a Buccaneers t-shirt. And I thought, I could be taking depositions right now. And I thought, I really be careful what you complain about, right?
We've got to take a break in just a minute. By the way, you're going to have to meet my son, who is the world's biggest Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Trust me, since he was an infant, literally, he was a Buccaneers fan, and he is so happy right now. We'll talk about that after the break. But you are, again, watching Meldon Law and Friends, a weekly podcast from Meldon Law. Take a look at our website, www.meldonlaw.com, or give us a call anytime, toll-free, statewide, nationwide at 1-800-373-8000. Our primary practice areas are personal injury law and criminal defense. However, if it's any other type of matter, give us a call anyway. Jeffrey will steer you in the right direction, and no matter what it is, give us a call 24/7. Also, I've been reminded by our producer to tell you that you can watch us today, of course, Friday, the first day of January 2021 on Facebook at Meldon Law Facebook page. But we also are on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Player.fm, Deezer, or whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast. So by all means, take a look at Meldon Law and Friends. We will be right back. Thanks so much for watching.
I was driving behind a lady, and very suddenly she moved out of the way. There was a log laying in the road, and when I hit my brakes, I went on top of the log. I had 280 discs. I just haven't been the same since. Jeffrey Meldon fought for me all the way. Him and his team really went there for me. Throughout the whole lawsuit, he made sure that my bills was paid. It was never no whenever I called him and asked him for something.
Being a client at Meldon Law was special because I felt like I was really being listened to, and I felt welcome by the entire staff. If I were in a situation where I needed legal advice and help, I would absolutely reach out to Jeffrey because his reputation alone speaks for itself. But on a personal level, I know that he would take care of me and help me solve those problems, and I would feel safe with him.
Hello and welcome back to Meldon Law and Friends, your weekly podcast from Meldon Law, a statewide law firm with its primary office in Gainesville. and with offices in Marion County and Ocala and South Florida, covering the entire Tri-County area, from Miami-Dade through Broward through Palm Beach County. And this is January 1st, 2021, Jeffrey Meldon. And we've got a lot of other things we do to communicate with the community, such as the newsletter, all sorts of things going on.
Yeah, and I wanted to invite everyone who's either listening or watching us to check out our newsletter, Meldon Law Talk. We started it in 2007. We have over 15,000 subscribers. And the purpose of the newsletter is connect with members of the community.
Sure, and it's not just law topics. Jeffrey writes the feature article for every issue. It may be about personal injury law. It may be about a trip to Israel. It may be about any number of things. But we have recipes each month. We have a puzzle. We have all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, our Trivial Pursuit is one of our favorites. But we also have a lot of giveaways to the community because one of the purposes of Meldon Law is to share our success with the community. During the holiday season, we've been giving away free $25 gift certificates to Harry's Bar and Grill. It's both in Gainesville and Ocala. And the purpose is to really share with our community. And we get these incredible letters from some of our subscribers talking about how meaningful it is for them to be able to go out and do things that they normally wouldn't do because they're on a limited budget. And we're also trying to promote local businesses in our newsletter and nonprofits and try to create a community within the Meldon Law family.
And let's not forget, one of the big accomplishments in 2020 is Meldon Law became and is the official community sponsor, law firm sponsor of the Florida Gators.
Yeah, it was really a privilege to be chosen by the Florida Gators among all the other fine lawyers in the community to be the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. And in 2021, we are so excited to carry that moniker forward.
And it's all sports: baseball, basketball, women's softball, gymnastics, track and field, lacrosse. Whatever it is, you'll see Meldon Law out there. So I know you're proud of that. You worked real hard. That was a tough negotiation, but it's over and we're moving forward.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I go to a lot of the sports events, you know, not only football and basketball, where I'm always at those games, but all the other sports. And we're going to be all over the electronic boards on the in all the games. We're going to have some involvement, and it's such an honor to be a Gainesville resident and a longtime member of the community and be involved in such a close way with the Florida Gators. So 2020 miraculously turned out to be one of our best years
It really
ever.
did. So let's get back to our great guest, Nathan Whitaker, a man of many, many talents. And one of them is you're a very accomplished author. You wrote a book about Tony Dungy, one of the most beloved, admired NFL coaches of all time.
How did that evolve, Nathan?
So I left the Jaguars after 3 years and went to the Buccaneers. And I arrived in Tampa for Tony's last year as head coach of the Buccaneers. And so, as I tell everybody, you know, it was a great year, not a great year, but it was great to be around Tony for a year. Tony, every now and then will, as he's telling the story, he'll tell people that Nathan and I worked together for 2 years. And I have to remind him it was one really, really, really long year. His last year was, you know, was he going to be fired? There were rumors floating around all season. Were they going to bring in Bill Parcells? Those were the rumors that were floating at the time. And so it was week to week. And we started off losing more than we won, finally got the ship righted and made the playoffs, but very stressful throughout. And the one person who was not totally pulling his hair out and stressed out was Tony. And I asked Tony late in the season, that he and I were alone in the locker room at one point, and I said, you know, Coach, I really appreciate your witness in light of this whole circus. And Tony's response was, you know, sometimes I think that God wants there to be a circus so that people can see that there's another way to respond. And it wasn't this, hey, tough times don't last, but tough people do, or all of which are valid. But it wasn't like, hey, I just got to slog through it. It was actually, this is where I'm supposed to be, and it's okay that it's hard. And that resonated with me. I was there 2 more years. I was there with John Gruden. So we won a Super Bowl and I got this really big.
You got the ring. How about that?
Yeah.
Great experience. 2 years with John. And then they came in and cleaned house and wanted all Gruden people. So they got rid of the rest of us dingy people who were there. And I went to my wife and I said, I think Tony's approach to life, Tony's approach to balance, Tony would have staff meetings that his coaches wouldn't start until 8:30 because they knew they would work into the evenings and not necessarily be able to tuck in their kids or whatever, see them at the end of the day. So Tony said, let's start late enough to where our coaches can take our kids to school if they want to, or whatever it may be. And so I just said to my wife, he's got such a different approach in this high stress environment. And pretty much every environment in the world is becoming more and more high stress. And maybe this can help people. And so to her credit, she said, great. And so we passed on offers from the Seahawks and the Falcons and decided to try to write a book. The downside was that it took me 3 years to talk Tony into it. Tony was like, I don't think I have anything to share. And certainly people don't want to hear what I have to say. So I was basically unemployed following this dream for 3 years. And then when they won the Super Bowl, publishers wanted it. Publishers were knocking down his door. And Tony said to them, I'll do it, but it has to be with Nathan because I trust him and I know his heart. And publishers, we found a number who were willing to do it. Tyndale was a great partner, but they were totally nervous. I had never written anything I tried to tell them, look, I did a bunch of 10-page papers as an English major. But for some reason that didn't comfort them. And Tony said, look, Nathan will do it. It'll be fine.
Now, how did you learn? How did you learn the process of writing a book?
I had no idea what I didn't know and basically just threw myself into it. And we wrote it in 24 days. Tony, thank goodness his mom taught English for 20 years and he would go through, and my dad we talked about my dad being an attorney. I would send it to my dad. He would clean up things. We'd send it to Tony. Tony would say, I wouldn't use this word. This is a Harvard word. So he changed it to a University of Minnesota word. And so we were doing it on the fly. I had one friend at the time who had published a book. And I said, right at the beginning of the 24 days, I said, look, we told him we could do it in a month. So it would come out before the next football season started. And so we're on this crash course. And he said, 2 things I'd tell you. First, call the publisher back and say, nobody can do a month. I need more time. And I said, okay, well, that was our idea. So I really can't do that. And he said, well, the second thing is write what you would want to read. And I said, okay, great. And wrote that down. I said, okay, what's next? And he said, that's it. And I said, okay, that's like the most unhelpful talk I've ever gotten. But to his credit, as I was writing, I kept thinking, what would I want to read? And of course, I'm constrained. It's a memoir. So we can't make up facts or make things more interesting than they were. But what I had read at the time and what I still read a lot of are mysteries and thrillers and things where the author clearly is trying to figure out ways to keep you engaged. What makes you turn the page? What makes you keep going? And so I kept thinking. And so there were times at which Tony would say, hey, the end of this story, we've started out with what happened, but I relied on that later. And I said, right, let's make the reader wait. And just kind of, we're not going to spoon feed them. And I don't know if any of it worked. It ended up selling a bunch of copies.
Well, I think you're being a little modest. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller, as I understand. Quiet Strength. I think that totally encapsulates what Tony was all about.
No doubt. It was the perfect title for him. And he's such a thoughtful person. But yes, it did incredibly well. And so this started, as I mentioned, I felt called to write this book about Tony, but it now has launched a whole career where, as you mentioned earlier, I'm doing speaking. So Tony and I've done 7 books together, and then I've written with James Brown.
7 books.
7 books. We've done a book on marriage, on leadership, on teamwork, a daily devotional. And so those have spawned, and then again, the book with Tim Tebow and James Brown, and those have spawned then getting to speak on leadership and doing training with corporations on teamwork. And so it's been this whole career that I never could have envisioned. Thank goodness I had that 1-year degree from Florida's business school. So
I want to ask you, how did your training, at Duke, at Harvard Law School, prepare you to be a writer? And what are were there any similarities between practicing corporate law and being able to write this book?
So I think so. I think being able to express yourself is very important. And one of the things Tony joked about Harvard words, but it was nothing like dealing with James Brown, who actually played basketball at Harvard, and he was throwing in all kinds of words I'd never heard of. And so we were having to, but one of the things I learned, whether it was communicating in law school or in college, as a side note, Duke at the time only offered one creative writing class, and you had to submit a writing sample, and I was rejected. So as I tell the folks at Duke, it took me 17 years to recover from the rejection and start writing. But all those experiences, frankly, taught me to write and write clearly and understand that I've got an audience, right? I'm writing to a judge. I'm writing this document that a client's going to read. And I need to, even though there are legal terms and there are terms of art and the like, I need my client to understand, okay, here's what you're advocating for me and here's why. Similarly with the judge. Judge Hodges, far smarter than I ever could dream of being. People ask me every now and then, would you ever want to be a district judge? And I'm like, well, yes, but I'm clearly not smart enough based on a sample size of one person that I know. But he would take the most complex ideas and boil it down in a way that I could totally understand it, or the litigants could understand it. And I think that was very valuable in writing, in thinking, all right, my goal at the end of the day, I just want to be clear, and I just want this to come across. I don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. I just need to be somebody who can communicate with the reader. So
how did you evolve into writing other books? Did some of those folks come to you and talk to you about writing, their book, or were you seeking them out?
Yeah. So Jeffrey, it was the craziest thing. So I finished Tony's book, and as Chris said, it hit number one. It just was on all the charts, and just an amazing experience. And the publisher came back to us and said, would you do a second book? And Tony said, well, I've only got one, life story. What else is there to do? And so they said, well, how about a book of values? And so we wrote this book, Uncommon. And as that was happening, James Brown called and said, hey, I'm good friends with Tony. Tony said, it was a pleasure working with you. Would you consider, he already had a deal in place. He needed a writer. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. And JB, and this is typical JB, but at the end, he's thanking me for taking his call. I'm like, you're James Brown, who I watch on every Sunday. You got to be kidding me. Of course. So that was book number 2. Then about a year later, so then the publisher came back for a third book with Tony. And as that was happening, I got a call, and it was Don Shula. And, a Florida kid growing up here and watching all those teams. And I honestly thought I was being pranked by a friend. And I'm thinking, there's no way Don Shula is cold calling me about writing a book, and end up hanging out in his house on Key Biscayne. And he ended up not wanting to write it at the end of the day, but got to know him over 4 or 5 months. And just an amazing experience. So most of them, and then the Tebows, again, with my dad having been involved in the Athletic Association and being a Gainesville guy, got connected with the Tebows. They had read Tony's book. And so I turned it down. They were trying to get it out before the draft, and I couldn't get it done that quickly because I had a book of Tony's that had a deadline right before the draft. And
well,
so
Nathan,
I had to pass.
I would love to keep going. Unfortunately, my producer is not nudging me, and we've got to cut to, but I have to say, you are one of the most inspirational, fascinating guests I think we've ever had on this show.
Well, here, I have a suggestion, Nathan. I think there's a lot more that we have to talk about. How about if we have you back on again as a guest sometime in the future, and let's finish up this incredible discussion that we've been having.
That sounds great. That sounds great. I'm sorry for being
How
so
can people get a hold of you? You have a website, right? You do public speaking, personal coaching. You do so many things. How can people get a hold of you?
So the easiest way is through the web, nathanwhitaker.com. It's Whitaker with 1 T, N-A-T-H.
We'll put it up on the graphic.
nathanwhitaker.com. But I'm also on Twitter. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and the like. And I do all my own social media. So I'm happy to connect with anybody out there. So that'd be great.
We appreciate you joining the show, and we'll be right back.
The Meldon Law Firm from the beginning has been built on giving back to the community. I enjoy coming to work as much today as I did in 1971 when I opened my practice. I don't look at this as a job. I look at it as serving other people. While we're alive, what better feeling can you achieve than knowing that you've helped other people and thereby you enrich your own life?
I've done mornings here on Sky Radio for 17 years. Jeffrey Meldon started doing his weekend show here 16 years ago. One of the things that separates Jeffrey is I don't see him out there hollering for people's business. I see him out there investing in the community. He's touched a lot of lives, and a lot of it he'll never know what a difference he made in somebody's life about information that he has shared on the air.
Hello and welcome back to Meldon Law and Friends, a weekly podcast from Meldon Law, a statewide law firm with 3 offices. Primary office in Gainesville. We have an office in South Florida covering the entire Tri-County area, Miami-Dade, Broward, all the way up through Palm Beach County, and in Central Florida in Marion County in Ocala. My name is Chris Qualman and joined, of course, by the host, founder of Meldon Law, CEO Jeffrey Meldon. Today is January 1st, 2021. Like I said in the earlier segment, hard to believe, but we're really saying that year, 2021. How happy could we be?
Yeah, I'm very excited. We got some great football this afternoon. And, what do you think? We got what? Alabama is playing Notre Dame. Is Notre Dame a pretender?
I think, judging by, you and I watched that Notre Dame-Clemson game, and I know we've got a lot of Notre Dame fans out there, but no, I don't think they're going to give Alabama too much competition. So I think it's pretty safe to say, at least from my perspective, Alabama's going to the championship.
And then we got Clemson against Ohio State. What do you think about that game?
Well, I should ask you that question because Jeffrey, of course, like you say, you always have 2 horses in the race. So Ohio State grad and, of course, a Florida fan and proud sponsor of the Gators.
Yeah, but now there's a new element.
That's
because
right.
It looks like the Jags are going to have Trevor Lawrence as their new quarterback, right?
That's going to make somebody happy in our law firm. Ian Pickens, of course, one of our attorneys, probably the biggest fan of the Jags I know. So I know he's happy about that. So I don't know. I think Clemson looks really strong, but that running back for Ohio State who had that huge game end of the season, it could go either way.
Yeah, that's a real ball game. I think there's 3 great teams that are in the playoffs.
Right. Sorry, Notre Dame. Don't think you deserve to be there. Anyway.
But we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. We want to just say a couple of quick administrative things, a little bit of housekeeping. We are video-wise. You can watch us and listen to us on Facebook. You can go to the Meldon Law Facebook page, and you can watch even our old archived shows. This is our 10th episode of Meldon Law and Friends. We had the head ball coach. We had Dr. Pete Endelicato. Gosh, we had Shane Matthews. So many great guests.
Yeah, it's been exciting. And we've had a great lineup so far. And in 2021, we're going to really bust out and, expand it even more.
So Facebook, YouTube, you can go. We have a YouTube channel for Meldon Law and Friends, Meldon Law Firm. Just look us up. You'll find us. Google it. If nothing else, you'll find our podcast. But our producer was telling me before we went back on the air that we are on 25 different audio podcasts, but the big ones are Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Player.fm, Deezer, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Subscribe to us. Our goal has always been from day one, Meldon Law and Friends, community-oriented, put on great shows with great content.
Yes, Chris, and I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners. It's been a great year for us in 2020 to finish up strong and keep evolving. And in 2021, we look forward to another really good year of growth.
Great year of growth for the firm. Great year of growth for this podcast. So keep watching and take a look at our website, www.meldonlaw.com. Or call us anytime toll-free at 1-800-373-8000. Our primary practice areas are personal injury cases, big truck crashes, motor vehicle crashes, trip and fall, slip and fall. We also do criminal defense, including DUI. But whatever the case may be, whatever the type of case, give us a call. Jeffrey knows everybody. We'll steer you in the right direction.
And thank you again for watching. If you need any help, our phone number is 1-800-373-8000. We're glad to get you in the right direction on any matter, or you can go to meldonlaw.com and join our newsletter list and just give us a call. Say we'd like to join the newsletter, and we will surprise you with our gift box.
You'll be surprised with some really cool things. But let's get to our guest. I know this is somebody you've known for a long time, so I'm going to toss to you and let you introduce this man.
Okay, Brian Edelstein is a friend of mine for 20 years. I think I met him first sitting outside a Dragonfly restaurant with our mutual friend Mark Mizell, and Mark says, "Hey, I want you to meet this guy." And I think they were selling advertising for Insight magazine or something like that. And since that time, you've been doing great, and we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Say the least. He's done a little better since then.
Yeah, but tell us a little bit about your story, Brian. Like you came to the University of Florida when, and how does everything evolve since then?
Sure. I came to school here in '96, graduated in 2000, and started a couple businesses that really took off. Started and bought a couple businesses that took off in the early 2000s, and always planned on leaving Gainesville, but just never could.
You're a South Florida boy.
Like him, never left.
Gainesville was, for those of you that don't know, that listen to our show regularly, so people come up here from South Florida and they think this is kind of the Hicksville, right?
That's exactly what it is.
And they go, well, I'm not going to stay here. And then all of a sudden they get the Gator fever and they get involved with Gainesville. And that happened to you.
Yeah. I had some early success with business here, and after I sold the publishing company, we did a handful of publications at that time. We added visitor magazines, direct mail publications, and I sold that. And I always figured I would move back to South Florida and get out of the Hicks. Get out of the sticks, like you said. And I just, I looked at it and I said, I don't want to go back to South Florida. And so I've been here in Gainesville since '96. For 3 or 4 years, I was back and forth between here and California when I was producing some television. And then for a few years, I was in New York, but still had a place here. And so I've always, even when traveling, Gainesville's always been my home, even if I was spending more time somewhere else.
So I remember Insight magazine, you were selling advertising in it many years ago.
Yep.
And how did you decide to get into that?
So when I was in college, I owned a bar here called Martini's, and the publisher of Insight magazine sold me an ad. We started talking, became friends. I ended up buying, after I sold the bar, I ended up buying the magazine from him, and then added direct mail publications and visitor magazines and entertainment guides. So it was we had a small media company that I grew over probably a 3 or 4 year period and eventually sold. And so that's how I ended up there.
What did you learn from direct marketing?
So what you realize, what I loved about the publishing business, while it's a really, really challenging business, I got to interact with every business owner in town, and you become, it was a great learning experience for me, because when you can interact with, like yourself, the top lawyer in town, and you can interact with the top restaurateur in town, and you can interact with the highest grossing Domino's in the world, the founder of that, and you can interact with all these different businesses, they're just interesting conversations, and you pick their brain, and before you know it, you're sitting across from a marketing genius or a guy who's built a small empire. And so what I loved about that sales process and with the magazines was just the sheer number of businesses that I was exposed to, and just a ton of really, really smart people, and learning about all these different businesses and industries. And I think it served me well over the years just to have like a good sense of, is this business going to succeed? Is there a true need? Are they filling the need? Is the person who's running it, can they execute well and get the job done and really succeed?
You know, it's interesting because when I met you, you were literally just a kid, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're a 20, 21-year-old kid, and now, you know, now you've had all these successful
But you really
businesses.
owned a bar before you were 21. I actually read that and I thought, wait a minute, how did you own a bar before you were 21?
So it's a funny story. At the time, I was promoting some different bars, and I was looking for another bar to promote. It was very, very successful when I was in college, and I met someone who had the bar underneath, and so what we did was we basically leased the liquor license from him, and because I didn't actually own the liquor license, but rather leased it, legally and contractually, it was okay to do that. So we built out a whole space. It was called Martini's. Pretty nice bar, if I don't say so myself. It was a great spot, and so we leased that license, and I opened the bar and ran it, and for a couple of years, and then ultimately sold it, and it was probably my first true business endeavor, at scale.
As I understand it, you learned something from trying to run a business like that. And what was one of the lessons you learned after running that bar for 2 years?
Well, I learned that I would rather promote the bar than own the bar, because I was having tons of fun when I was promoting the bars in college. I was having tons of fun. I would go there, drink, have a good time, and then at the end of the night, I'm done. Now all of a sudden, I own the bar, and we're dealing with employees and payroll taxes and liquor surcharge, and just I'm running the business, and it was a great learning experience. But I realized there's easier ways to make money than running a retail establishment.
We're going to get into some more things when we come back.
Right. We got to cut to a break. My producer's nudging me, but once again, a fascinating story. I think if anybody ever qualifies for the title serial entrepreneur, you'd be that guy. So maybe we come back, talk a little bit more about your entrepreneurial efforts. Maybe some advice, for young people who, like yourself, coming out of college, might feel a little lost, a little disoriented about where they want to go with their lives. I think you're the guy to give that kind of advice. You've been watching Meldon Law and Friends, a weekly podcast from Meldon Law, a statewide law firm with offices in Gainesville, South Florida, and Marion County, and covering the entire state. Call us anytime toll free at 1-800-373-8000. Jeffrey Meldon and I welcome you to the show. We've got one more great segment. New Year's Day edition, January 1st, 2021. We'll be right back. Thank you for watching.
And I was in an accident. Someone ran a red light and hit me, and I was hurt. You don't know where to turn. Luckily, I called Jeffrey. These big insurance companies, they don't want you to win. They truly don't. But Jeffrey and his firm and the people that work here, they just really fight for you. You call the law offices of Jeffrey Meldon because you're going to need help, and they will help you.
Well, I was in a truck accident. Because of the accident, I've resulted in 3 back surgeries. We saw advertisements on TV, and guess who popped up more often than not? It was Jeffrey. The communication that he provided was so appreciative. He shows his compassion as a human. He assisted us in achieving one of our dreams, the acquisition of a home. And we're here today with smiles on our face with the assistance from Jeffrey.
Hello and welcome back to Meldon Law and Friends. This is our special New Year's Day, January 1st, 2021 edition. This is our 10th podcast. We started this, amazing, Jeffrey, 10 weeks ago. We're still clicking. Our producer tells us we have approximately 40 to 50,000 weekly viewers. It's really quite amazing.
And I want to thank everybody. It energizes us, and we want to keep it going.
It does. It's a great start to the new year. We start work again in a couple of days for 2021. We got some big cases we're working on and a great staff. I know you're excited about the new year for Meldon Law.
Yes, we've been very blessed to have the support of the community, and we look forward to continuing our success.
We had a great close to 2020, bigger and better things for 2021, and want to toss back to our guest, Brian Edelstein, who is like I said, a serial entrepreneur, but in a great way. What a success story, coming out of the University of Florida, longtime friend of Jeffrey's. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what led you to being an entrepreneur. Obviously, you don't like working for other people. You'd rather work for yourself.
You know, it's not that I mind working for other people. When certain companies that I've had have been acquired, I've been an employee, and I like to think I'm like the best employee in the world because I know exactly what that company wants. It's just kind of one thing has led me to the next, and you know, like anything, you find yourself down a path, and my father was an entrepreneur, my uncle was an entrepreneur, my cousins are entrepreneurs. I mean, my father was in more businesses than I can count. He had an importing business, he manufactured hats, he had armored cars, he had a candy business, a tobacco business. My cousins owned the largest screen printing company in the world. So I've just been around lots of people and lots of different businesses, and I think it probably just rubbed off, and you know, you find an opportunity and you just go with it. It wasn't ever like, this is what I want to do, and I'm dead set on, you know, being an entrepreneur and owning my own business. It just kind of worked out that way.
But what I take from what you just said, though, is that whether it was family or not, you found yourself in the presence, and you talked about this last segment, of great people who mentored you, people who obviously gave you ideas. It's sort of like, you know, iron sharpens iron. You're constantly looking to sharpen the saw, improve yourself. And I think that's what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong, that drawing off people who were successful has helped to make you successful.
I think that's always the case. I mean, it's so typical, but the more successful people you surround yourself with, the more successful you're going to be. I mean, it's just the more you learn, the better you are, the better you strive to be. All of those things happen when you're surrounded by great, successul people. So
what
absolutely.
about some of the influential books that you've read? Well, can you mention, what are some books that have had impact on you?
Malcolm Gladwell is, of course, great. I've read every sales book known to man. To me, I definitely read, but I am, to your point, I get more out of conversations and learning from people than, just, some people just want to sit down and consume books all day long. I'm more excited by sitting down with you or someone else and just having a great conversation, understanding their business. How are you generating customers? How are you operating at scale? How are you doing these things? And so that's been, I would say the best learning for me is talking to lots of great people, going back to your point.
I wanted to ask you about the project that you did, the Patriotic Country project you did. Give us a little bit of background, how you got into that and how it evolved.
Sure. So at the time, I had a record label, and we partnered with Sony. So we produced a compilation CD, like a Now or Totally Country. We had a series called Patriotic Country, a couple of top 10 gold albums, and the USO was our charity for those CDs. And we had a lot of success with the USO, and we started chatting with them, and we said, whatever happened to those old Bob Hope variety shows that you guys used to do? And they said, we never produced them, we just licensed our name. And I said, well, would you license your name to us for television? And they agreed, and that was the catalyst to then produce a modern day version of that Bob Hope variety show. So it was a long process. It was honestly probably the hardest thing I ever did. We went out initially, so we had the USO's name to use exclusively in conjunction with television. So we went out and tried to sell that to all the networks. And the traditional television models, you sell your show to the network. And you're the executive producer, they pay you to be the executive producer. The other model, which happens probably 1% of the time, is what they call a time buy. So we went to every network. They turned us down. Nobody wanted to do it because specials they take a lot of time and energy and money to get off the ground. And even though you can yield higher advertising dollars, it's not worth all the effort to put into it. So every network turned us down. So the other model is what they call a time buy. So what we did was we raised venture capital dollars and then we paid to produce the television show. And then we went to ABC and said, we don't need your money to produce the show. We're going to pay you to broadcast the show. So we bought 2 hours of network primetime television. And now instead of the network owning the commercials,
You retained all rights.
we retain all the rights. So we own all the commercial inventory, all the brand integration, all that content that we can now repurpose. So we took a show and we sold it off to GAC, Great American Country, and then we took the comedy and spiced that off. And and you can monetize this in as many different ways as possible. That's kind of the model.
You could probably teach a marketing class on that topic alone. That's amazing.
So we did that, and it was fantastic. That's when I mentioned I was living in Los Angeles at the time, or going back and forth between here and there. And I'm not sure if I answered your question. I gave you a long answer to a short question.
I'm listening because I was hanging out, you and our friend Mark Mizell. We would meet over at Dragonfly and sit around, and you guys say, yeah, we're working on this special, and I'd listen to you. And to hear that you actually pulled it off and did it successfully was pretty cool. I thought that, for a couple guys that, just came up with this idea, which to me was a long shot, and you were able to do it and pull it off.
And I'm just fascinated by the fact that you retained all the rights and all the ancillary, everything. Like you said, all the spin-off rights. That's quite a story.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was a lot of fun. I don't regret it. It was, what I realized was that many years for one thing, I need to see more progress along the way. It was a long road to get there, and totally worth it. But I decided television, it was fun to do, but I definitely don't want to spend the next 30 years doing that.
So what did you go into next?
From there, I had a medical marketing company. So I didn't start the company. A buddy of mine approached me and said, I'm looking to sell this company over the next 24 months. You're the best sales business development guy I know. Come help me build out the company. And so that's exactly what I did. So I came in, I joined him. We somewhere between doubled and tripled the company over a 2-year period. And then we were acquired by a publicly traded company, Everyday Health in New York. And we grew. It was a small business when we were acquired, but extremely profitable. We grew it from about a $3 million business unit to about a $40 million business unit. And that's when I was going to New York a lot. And so that's what I did next.
So, again, we have another great guest we could probably spend at least an hour with, if not more. And to that end, we have to wrap up this segment in just a moment. But one thing I want to cover quickly, but it's important. Advice for young entrepreneurs, kids, young men, young women coming out of college. What would you say to them, particularly facing the challenges with COVID?
I think there's really probably 2 big takeaways, if I had to say it. One is, it's probably the most cliche statement, but there's no substitute for hard work. Like, I killed myself, literally, figuratively, every possible way for a long, long time to build these businesses, and there's just no substitute for it. And then the other is just, opportunity is usually right in front of you. You just have to see it, and when you see that opportunity, you have to be willing to dive in and take advantage of it.
Sure.
And if you combine that with hard work, I don't want to say you're guaranteed success, because everything is harder than you expect, takes longer than you expect, and costs more than you expect. But when you find a great opportunity and you work hard at it, oftentimes things work out.
So you've got a LinkedIn page. If people want to call you, pick your brain, just like you pick other people's brains, passing it forward. What would be the best way for people to get a hold of you?
They can just look me up on LinkedIn. It's Brian Edelstein, and just message me on LinkedIn, and I'm on there all the time, so I'm happy to get back, and I'm happy to help anyone who wants to chat.
Okay, again, fantastic segment. I so appreciate what you've had to say. I'm going to make my kids watch it. Again, you've been watching Meldon Law and Friends. It's a weekly podcast from the Meldon Law Firm. We have 3 offices statewide. In Gainesville is our primary office, where we've been since the early 70s. We're now in our 6th decade of operation. We have offices in Central Florida, in Marion County, and our newest office, 4 years in operation, in South Florida, covering the entire Tri-County area, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, all the way through Palm Beach. I know that was a dream of yours, Jeffrey. We're now a statewide firm and the official sponsor of the Florida Gators.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see the development. You and I have our dreams for how things are going to evolve. But there's always little changes here and there, and we're going to roll with the flow and see what happens. And like what Brian said, you have to be there and be aware of what the opportunities are. And, you know, one of the messages I, tell all of our listeners and viewers is if we can help in any way, if you want to talk to me about some idea that you have, and I'll make time to sit and chat with you.
And he means it. He's not kidding. 1-800-373-8000. You've been watching Meldon Law and Friends. Stick around. Thank you for being a part of this show.
I was riding as a passenger in my friend's vehicle. A fellow ran a stop sign and we T-boned him. Had neck and shoulder and knee injuries and didn't know what to do, and I remember seeing one of Jeffrey's ads, so I gave him a call. He explained everything to me. I'd go see him and everything was done. Everything was taken care of. Don't waste your time with anybody else. Go see Jeffrey.
Hello and welcome back to Meldon Law and Friends, a weekly podcast from Meldon Law. We have 3 offices statewide: Gainesville, Ocala, and South Florida, covering the entire Tri-County area. And this is, of course, as we've been saying, our first podcast of 2021. We're so appreciative to all of you who've been watching us on multiple platforms, listening on multiple audio platforms. But I want to first thank our great guest these last 2 segments, Brian Edelstein. Many words of inspiration, I think, for not just young people coming out of college, but really anybody. And I'm certainly going to take those words to heart and rewatch this. But I also want to thank our first guest, Nathan Whitaker. What a tremendous life and career he's had. And safe to say we'll have both these guys back.
Yes, I think, Brian, it's interesting because I've known you since you were a young college kid, right? Hawking ads, in Insight magazine. And now to see you grow over the last 20 years has been wonderful, because I really enjoy seeing young people grow. Chris is serious. He's got triplets who are, how old are they?
23, 2 boys and a girl.
Yeah,
I'm going to make them watch this podcast. Anyway, we have to talk about the Gators. So disappointing loss. Hey, but you know what? I'm still very pumped about the season as a whole. Sorry to end it on a loss, but at the same time, it was a magical season. We still won the SEC East. Not a bad year.
Not only that, think about it. Between the 2 Kyles, Kyle Pitts and Kyle Trask, we had 2 players that were in the number 1. Trask was in the Heisman top 4.
Sure.
Pitts is considered to be one of the top.
And Heisman announcement's coming up in just a few days. I think it's the 5th, just 4 days from now. So who knows? But
a lot of great players on the team, and I think we built the foundation for the future. I think the young high school players are now looking at the Gators and understanding they're for real.
And you figure that we had 7 starters who didn't play this week, 4 of whom are, we had several going to the NFL. We lost 1 to COVID, but all things considered, I'm extraordinarily proud of this team. Hey, we beat Georgia and we won the SEC East.
And that's really the most important thing, because the goal when you start the season is always to beat Georgia and to win the SEC East.
And Brian, you were talking about, you were a freshman in '96. That was a pretty magical year. Think about that. First year national championship.
It was a great time to be a Gator, for sure.
All right, and you've seen lots more since then. Like you said, you stayed in town since. the back-to-back, the basketball, the football. It's a pretty great place to live here.
It is.
Again, want to thank you for watching Meldon Law and Friends. This is our first episode for 2021, but we're going to be back each and every Friday after this. We'll be back next Friday, January 8th, 2021. You can look at our backlog of other episodes on the Meldon Law Facebook page, or you can go to YouTube. Subscribe to us. That way you won't miss anything. You'll see the head ball coach from last year, and we had Shane Matthews, lots of others, and a lot of other good ones coming up.
Yes, and we look forward to having a wonderful 2021, and Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year. We'll see you next week.
Happy New Year.